Mam ogromną przyjemność na zakończenie konferencji zaprezentować Tilo Linza i jego prezentację o tym, jak ma wyglądać przyszłość testowania. Tilo.
So, before starting, first let me thank you or the organization team for inviting me to this very interesting conference, and I found it very, very well organized and in an interesting environment here, and a lot of very good testers. Some of you I already met during the last 1.5 days, and now, as you all of you are a little bit tired, I like to give you some view of the possible future of testing. Well, who of you really believes that I know the future of testing? Who finds that's likely? Hands up. Who finds that's unlikely? Or I think you are sleeping already. Well, of course I'm of course I don't know anything about the future of testing, and normally at this point I stop this presentation and all the audience is going home and leaving, but of course as we are on this ferry here, that's not possible, and so I will try to give you some ideas what could be in the future, and also give you a way that you can on yourself imagine what possible futures you have to prepare for. Well, and what I can bring in this topic is experience from the last 20 years of testing. I run the Imbus company, a consulting company in Germany with about 250 employees, and have written some books on testing, but can that give any information about tomorrow's testing? Do you believe? What we need to have is like in testing, a method which gives us some structured approach to think about what would be possible and what could be changed in the future. And the reason why we should think about that is to prepare for new situations, for our own possibilities, for our own career. And one way to do that is scenario planning. Scenario planning is a method used by futurologists, by people who are thinking about future for professional reasons, not only about the testing future, but future of everything. And what I do is give you a rough overview of this method and then use it to think about the future of testing. So, what we first do, or should do, is to look at our current situation. So where are we today in testing? What is our daily business? How does it work? And then, a second step, we should analyze what factors, what drivers will probably change the way we are working. And then of course you can, if you have identified such drivers, then of course you can imagine scenarios which could probably become true in the future tomorrow, or in 1 year, in 10 years, in 50 years. I will give you a first example. Well, our current situation at the moment. Who has any ideas? What do you think what your current situation is at the moment? Well, look around. Where are we? We are here in the Sea View Bar. So that's our current situation we have identified. And in the second step, we will think about, or all of you now think about your motivations, the drivers, the environment which might influence your next hours or tomorrow, your tomorrow. Well, perhaps you are all tired and you imagine go home and sleeping. Or you'll say you have learned very interesting lessons. Well, stay here and hear more lessons. Who thinks that is likely? Also nobody? Okay. Well, then perhaps you say, okay, yesterday was a great party. That's likely, and then that's your future. At least one possible scenario of your future for tomorrow. And so, in the same way, if you are thinking how testing could perhaps change, try to think in pictures. It's not about reasoning about the future, it's not about thinking and analyzing in too much detail, because of course it's the nature of future, nobody really knows what will come, but it's about thinking in pictures to just imagine several possibilities on a very high level. So that could be one future for you, if you perhaps decide this evening to enter the ship again and again ship to Sweden again. But I think you all would say that's rather unlikely for you. And so every picture you imagine could be more or less likely, could become true for reality with a certain possibility, but if you are reasoning about the future, then you always should imagine several pictures, several different pictures, and not too early judge what of these pictures will really become true, because it's too open, the future is open. So you can only put the several pictures beside, on your table and have a look on them and say, oh, that would be possible, that would be possible, and then you can prepare for several, or you should prepare for several situations which might become true. So that was just a method of how you can look into future from everything, from science, from testing, from economy, whatever. And now if we are using this method to look in the future of testing, we should first remember what dimensions could change in testing. So what are the key factors that define the way we are testing? Well, of course, that's first and mainly the objects, the hardware and the software we are testing. So the software under test, the things we are testing, that's one main factor that defines what and how we are working every day. And of course, the objectives, why we are testing, are in close relation to the objects. For example, if you imagine a mobile phone, in opposite to a classical phone, the objectives, what you have to test and why you are testing, are quite different. So if the testing objects evolves, maybe also the objectives, how to test and why to test, also change. Well, a second dimension is the methods and the tools we have available and we can use. So, for example, if we would have today no testing tools, no test automation tools, all of you would just test manual. And if there are tools invented, you can use them and your way you are working is changing. So of course, if new methods would be invited or new tools would be developed for testers, then your way you are working and your future of your testing would change. In this third dimension, the standards and the processes you are following or you have to follow. For example, at the moment or during the last years, the shift from traditional processes to agile processes is a main driver which is changing the way you are working. Well, and that's just some examples. Everybody sitting here has slightly other environments and other objects in these 3 dimensions and using other tools, but normally you are testing traditional IT applications today, or mobile apps, or embedded systems, or systems of systems like telecommunication systems, where a huge range of subsystems is connected together, and you are perhaps using test automation tools, you are perhaps using load testing tools, code analyzers and so on, and a lot people here are ISTQB certified, so you're following education standard, you are working according to Scrum or to V model, and following several other standards. And the drivers of change, which are changing our way we are working today, affect all these 3 dimensions in parallel. And if we now think about how testing could and will change probably, we should have a look on which are the drivers which affect us and what effects do they have on these dimensions. Well, let's go a little bit into more detail and have a first look on one group of main drivers who are influencing the way we are working. That is a hype cycle diagram. Who of you is familiar with this sort of diagrams? Or not familiar? Hands up. Okay, then I will explain it a little bit. So, all the dots here on this line represent different application development trends which are working and visible today. So that axis here means that not that this is happening in future and this is not happening today. It means that all of this is visible today, but with other and different levels of maturity. So, for example, if you are thinking about 3D photographing with electronic photographing, that's very common today. So we are here on the plateau of productivity. That means everybody is using that technology today. In the opposite, if this technology would be new, invented, probably there are some first prototypes at a university or something like that, when the technology exists already, but is only visible in first trials and first prototypes. Yes, and so you can use this curve to order and display and list all the several application development trends and display whether they are in the moment innovation triggers, or if they are at the peak of expectations. That means you can read in your press, in the newspapers, on the television, every day see some news about this new emerging technology or this new trend. and everybody is talking about, but few people are using it. That is meaning the technology is here. Well, after that, the technology is used more and more, but there are also more disappointments because it does not reach the heated expectations. Yes, and then the technology will get mature and mature, and finally is used every day by everybody. So, and the way and the speed, the technology or the trend is driving through this curve, of course, is different. And that means some technologies use 1 or 2 years from here until there, and other years needs more than 2 years or 20 years. And that is indicated by these signs here. And if you have a detailed look, you can see what technology is expected to be productive in how many years. So that's in general the way you can read such a hype cycle. And this hype cycle here is from the Gartner Group, who have to make every year a new version of this cycle, of this application development trends. And this cycle here is from the current year or last year. And I have picked some, as examples, some development trends that affect our testing, our way of testing, as I see it in a very short term. For example, crowd testing. Of course, I think who has heard about crowd testing, or who is a crowd tester? Anybody of you? So crowd testing is the idea that testers register on a cloud system, and customers can put their system into the cloud, also into the cloud, and then say, please crowd test these systems for usability, for example, especially a mobile app, for example, and then somebody who is registered there can just log in and say, I will test your system, and some other 100 testers will do the same, and when the customer receives the outcome and the testing report. Also, test data management is at the moment a very important trend. That's about how to define and how to generate and how to store test data according to security regulations. For example, how to use anonymized test data. For example, if you are testing a banking systems, to prevent that the tester can read how much money a client has on his account. Well, cloud testing, another trend, SOA testing, and behavior-driven development, which of course is closely related to test-first and test-driven development, that also will affect the way we are testing. Well, all that are trends which mainly are changing our world during the next 2 to 5 years. But there are, of course, also other trends which are slower evolving, and that are drivers driven by new emerging technologies. Here the same curve and some examples. Cloud computing, that means that all systems are working and are installed and working and running in a cloud environment. And that means, for example, that a tester can connect to them from everywhere in the world, and a group of testers does not have to be in the same room or in the same department or in the same city. Mobile robots, which will generate new requirements for security and safety, and also the testing such systems will generate new requirements for testers, how to test a mobile robot, how to decide whether a test is passed or failed based on what the robot is doing at the moment. Autonomous vehicles, cars which drive by themselves, which might be testing task for the next in the next 5 years. When biochips, chips which are connected to human beings, the Internet of Things. That means that every piece of product, whatever you see here in this room, will have its own IP address, and not only have an IP address, but will be able to communicate with other things. And at least brain-computer interfaces. That is something that technologists and futurologists say will be reality in about 10 years. That you do not need any keys, any keyboards anymore, so you can just connect to the computer more directly and control it by brain. That of course will also change the way you test these applications which are controlled directly by brain, by your brain as tester. So that was a look at the drivers which might change the way we are testing. And as I told you some minutes ago, if we are looking in the future, we will have to first analyze where we are, then think about the drivers, and then imagine how the drivers change the situation we are at the moment. Therefore, now let's have a look on the situation we are in the moment, at the moment in testing. I think, again, I use the Gartner hype cycle. I think, as for some examples here on the rise at the moment is, of course, the ISTQB certified tester. Some people here in this room have yesterday taken the exam. Yes. And there are some other new elements and new syllabi ISTQB is preparing. Perhaps you have heard about it. Certified Agile Tester is only one of several extension syllabi the ISTQB is preparing. So the concept is to extend the foundation level by additional modules and to also extend the advanced level by additional modules. And one first module is the Certified Agile Tester foundation level. That module has been released this year in May. And then the second module where people are working on is model-based testing. So certified ISTQB certified model-based testing extension syllabi. And in Germany at least, there's a group working on certified automotive software tester. That's an additional module for foundation level testers, making them familiar with the special way of testing in the automotive industry. And these things here are at the moment here at the beginning of their life cycle, but I think they will move and influence your practice very fast within the next 1 and 2 years. Another example here is enterprise class agile development and testing. If you look here, I have agile testing climbing the slope on the right side. The difference here is agile testing means testing in one project, in one agile project, and this here means agile development on the company level, also including testing on company level in an agile way, and including transforming the complete company in a more agile way, from marketing to sales and law and whatever, and including management. That is a trend which is small at the moment, but I believe that if you're doing that here right, then you will influence the rest of the company. So more or less in some years it will be mainstream that the company in general perhaps reacts and acts in an agile way. Well, and at the peak, at the moment, in the newspapers and in the blogs on the internet, is a new standard, ISO 29119. Everybody of you should be aware of it. That's a new standard that will replace a couple of other standards which at the moment are mentioned in the foundation level syllabus. For example, the IEEE 829. And it definitely will affect the way you are testing in the next years. Well, test first. At the moment, at the peak from my point of view, everybody is trying it, and most teams who are trying it will learn that it's harder than they believe, and then it will come to some disappointments. That's before of us. Well, model-based testing, I think that model-based testing, I've seen model-based testing since 10 or 20 years. Everybody always new tries what can be generated, and then to transform it and to put it in real life is very, very hard. And I have really seen it in real life, and it are only a handful projects, and therefore I expect that will not be productive shorter than in 10 years. That's my personal view. Perhaps you have other experiences. What I see here more interesting at the moment, of course, is agile testing, but I see agile testing not yet 100% productive, but on the climbing the slope, because if you look at the several practices you have to do in agile testing and you compare it to the practice in your projects, for example, unit testing and test first, I think you realize that test first approach is not yet working in every project. Not every team can it at the moment. You have your testers and your developers have to learn a lot, and that will happen during the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years. Also here, integration testing and continuous integration. The tools here for continuous integration are productive, but if you look on your own set of integration tests, perhaps tomorrow have a look on these integration tests, count them, how many these are and how good they are, and ask yourself whether they are really doing integration testing, and analyze whether they not only are just unit tests called integration tests. Then perhaps you will find out that also here in this area of integration testing there's a long way to go in the next years, and much room for improvement. In system testing, if you try to be agile, you have to do system testing every day, complete regression runs every day from the continuous integration environment. Also, there's a lot of potential to improve your way you are testing. And at least, if you have a quality assurance department, for example, if you're working in medical industry and have a quality assurance department, then I'm sure that this department is still not agile. It's following a linear approach, and also this approach, the quality management and the quality assurance should change and will change to more agile way of working, and that will happen during the next 2, 3, 5 years. So a last point, and last example, what is already productive and very sophisticated is the huge number of test automation tools. So today you have really no reason to say you will not practice test automation because there's a lack on tools. That's no reason. If you have the need to select a tool, for example, visit this platform here, testwarez.com. That's a platform which stores and presents some 100 testing tools and also a lot of test automation tools. You can search the tools by category. You can search by other criteria, and you can log in, register yourself, and become member of this community on test tool experts discussing the tools and sharing best practices. And if you are looking for a way to improve your current and your own testing and to identify which tools can help your project, then this resource could be useful for you. Well, and of course the certified tester foundation level and advanced level currently is on the plateau of productivity. That's a standard, and most projects and most testers are following it. The improvement here in this area will come from the extension modules. Well, if we have a look back to our methods, then we have seen what your situation today might look like. We have seen several drivers of change, a summary, mobile technology, cloud technology, for the next 1-2 years, artificial intelligence for the next 2 to 5 years, bioinformatics for the next decade, and of course some wildcards. That's something I have not yet explained. Of course you can analyze and analyze and analyze, and then something quite completely different will happen. And that reason for that is that of course in the future there will also suddenly appear some drivers and some new things completely unforeseeable. Well, and then these drivers will change the way we are how we are testing today to these scenarios. So we will have to test cloud-based systems, mobile robots, autonomous vehicles. You have to test within the Internet of Things. Perhaps you are using cloud-based tools or cloud-based testing services. Perhaps you become member of a crowd testing team. And perhaps the developers are working test-driven, that means driven by you. And now the question is, when in the future can that become reality, tomorrow or in 10 years or in 5 years? And what pictures should you have in mind to enable yourself to prepare for that situations? And I have selected 3 examples, 3 scenarios which might become reality, and what I'm interested in your view on this. So I ask you whether you think that each of these scenarios is likely or unlikely. The first scenario, scenario A, is related to the Internet of Things. The scenario is the Internet of Things leads to a rapid increase in connectivity. It tends to become more difficult to test individual system elements of the Internet, and since they have to be isolated for this purpose. In most cases, setting up a separate test environment is foregone, and testing new system elements takes place in the real environment. That means in the future it might be the case that what is said today by ISTQB, that you have to set up a separated system test environment, will be completely foregone, because it will be completely impossible to set up a second Internet of Things. And the consequence, perhaps the scenario, could be that such system tests will repeatedly cause unexpected side effects on the Internet, on all the things which are connected to your test object. and this will lead to numerous accidents and damage in real life because you are testing. That's one of the possible scenarios. So, do you believe that? Hmm? That's the question for scenario A. So please, do you believe that this is a possible destination you have to prepare for 2020, 2035 or 2050? Who believes that's likely for 220? Hands up. One. Oh, can you count? Four? Okay, and unlikely?
Say 200.
200, yes?
Say.
Okay. So on the same,
About
230,
60% don't vote it.
likely in 2035.
13.
13,
Sorry, 14. 24.
24. Okay, again 180 should be.
You do not believe. One? Okay, good.
So, last question, 2050. Twenty. Also 180. But, well, I think that's quite interesting because what you say here is that you as testers and your companies will be able from now on, also in 2020, will be able to set up for system testing a second Internet of Things. I don't believe that. That was scenario A, now scenario B. Perhaps that's a little bit trustable, more trustable than the scenario E. So the scenario is the weak artificial intelligence carries so many risks, resulting not least from the intended autonomy that their development will be increasingly controlled by state, nationally and globally. That means the state authorities will see that artificial intelligence systems or systems controlled by artificial intelligence will be very dangerous, and therefore they will rule that these systems have to be tested as good as possible, and the consequence probably is that the natural and broad application of test-driven development. With this, the testers have arrived in the post-empirical age, and they decide what will be ready to go into production. That's the dream of us as testers. Do you think that that is likely or unlikely scenario? So, what do you believe for 2020? Do you think that you as tester really define and say what, if a system is ready, is done and is ready for production, or will that be, as today, perhaps driven by developers? So do you think scenario B is likely in 2020? Hands up. Unlikely. To 35. Likely. Unlikely, also 170. And 2050. So? So, and the last scenario for today, the neuro software tester. Well, we have seen earlier that human-computer interfaces will be there in 10 years. And due to the innovative device from the smart contact lens to the brain-computer interface, the human brain increasingly participates in IT systems. And this leads to an increasing data exchange between your brain and your computer. And of course, if you are testing when an application connected with this interface to your brain, you also have to test, if you want or not, this interface and the source of the data, your brain. That means the brain thus needs to be integrated in the tests to a certain extent. Part of the software testers becomes neuro software testers, meaning some specialists will, or some of you will become experts in testing such systems, experts in defining test data for testing such interfaces, and of course then have to acquire expertise in how the human brain works, because which kind of test data you need depends on your knowledge and your understanding on the reaction of the other side of the interface, your brain. So the question here is, do you think that's a realistic or likely scenario? In 2020, hands up. One? Six. Unlikely 200. Yes. Not voting is saying unlikely. In 2035. And 170 or? Well, and in 2050. Mm-hmm. So, that was scenario C. And before we have a look on the outcome and on your view of the future of testing, my company is at the moment preparing a larger study on this topic with more scenarios. There have been 3 examples. If you are interested to read and study also the other examples, you can send me an email. This study will be published mid-November 2014. If you are interested to read it, send me an email with your address, with your email address, and then I will send you a PDF. Or you can join us on Xing, on LinkedIn, and Twitter, or on have a look on our website, on our news there. Visit the website somewhere in mid-November, and then you will find the study there. So, oh, that was unexpected. Have a look here. So in general, I think you reacted like typical testers. That means you think most things very unlikely. I have seen this way of thinking in a lot of similar speeches in Germany and elsewhere, where I asked questions like these. So testers are very skeptical, and also skeptical according to change in the future, or change the way they are testing. But I think you should be a little bit more open to such possible changes. If you remember the last 10 years, and remember the test objects you have tested 10 years before, they were quite different from today, and this change will go on. And so are open to changing future, are open to changing your way of testing, are open to learn new things, and also are open to try out new tools, new methods, because it's not only that the world changes and you have to react. The way you are working can also change the world. So if you are tomorrow selecting new kind of testing tools, and your company then will use it because you have been the first person who tries it, then you are also changing the world and making a small part of this change. And also interesting is that scenario C in 2050, you think that is quite realistic. If you calculate how old will you be in 2050, a lot of people here sitting perhaps will really work with brain-computer interfaces. Well, thank you for listening.